What makes a person become a monster? A question that has haunted humanity for centuries. Across history, serial killers have stunned the world with their unimaginable crimes, taking not one life, but several, driven by urges so dark that they seem almost unfathomable. From the charm of Ted Bundy to the grotesque acts of Jeffrey Dahmer, their actions raise a chilling question. What happens in the mind of a serial killer? Is it pure evil? Or is it something more, something we all have a trace of? When we dive into the mind of a serial killer, we are forced to face uncomfortable truths. This isn't about excusing their horrors. No, it's about understanding them. Not to justify the acts, but to learn how to prevent them, to peel back the layers and understand what drives someone to commit unspeakable acts, to understand the psychology that makes a killer a killer. The mind of a serial killer is not one-dimensional. It is an abyss that stretches deep into the dark corners of the human psyche. These individuals are not always outliers of society, not always the ones who look like monsters. No, they blend in. They charm, manipulate, and convince us to trust them. And then they strike. These killers don't just kill for survival. They kill for a thrill. They kill for control. They kill because their minds are wired in a way that none of us could ever understand. At least, not until we look deep enough. In the beginning, many serial killers seem so normal. They're often successful, charismatic, even charming. Ted Bundy was a law student, a volunteer at a crisis hotline. Jeffrey Dahmer seemed to live a quiet life until his horrific actions were uncovered. But inside, there was a darkness, a disease growing in the corners of their minds. Understanding what makes these killers tick requires us to venture into the twisted wiring of their brains. Is it biological, environmental, or is it a combination of both? As we explore these questions, we enter the world of those who have killed over and over again. We learn about the psychological forces that compel them, about the trauma, the abuse, the disorders that shape their behavior. These are not excuses, but windows into their suffering. Understanding these forces is crucial because only by understanding what pushes someone to murder can we hope to stop it from happening again. Serial killers are driven by a mixture of deep-seated issues. The FBI's Crime Classification Manual from 2020 identified several key motivators: power and control, sexual gratification, thrill-seeking, and sometimes financial gain or ideology. These aren't just random impulses. They are deeply rooted desires that have twisted these killers into something monstrous. John Wayne Gacy, a man who murdered 33 young men, was obsessed with power. He craved dominance, using torture to assert his control, compensating for the powerlessness he felt in his life. His victims were not human to him. They were tools for his pleasure, toys in a game of dominance. Ted Bundy, on the other hand, was driven by sadistic sexual fantasies. His killings were acts of twisted sexual gratification, where he blended sex with violence in ways that can't even be put into words. Bundy didn't just kill to satisfy an urge. He killed to fulfill a twisted fantasy that spiraled further out of control with each life he took. The Zodiac Killer, still an enigma to this day, killed for the thrill. He wasn't interested in money. He wasn't interested in revenge. No, he killed simply for the rush, for the game. He taunted the police with letters and ciphers, playing with them, relishing in the fear he instilled in the public and law enforcement. To him, murder was a puzzle, a twisted, chilling game. But not all killers are motivated by such primal urges. Some, like Aileen Wuornos, killed for survival. Wuornos, a prostitute, killed for money, for control over her own life in an unforgiving world. She killed to survive, to protect herself from the violence of the men who abused her, and yet her killings were brutal, born out of years of abuse and neglect, forever shaping her into the monster the world would come to fear. Serial killers don't kill for simple reasons. Their motivations are a web of psychological triggers, each one feeding into the next. The FBI's 2020 manual outlines the key categories of these motivations. The drive for power and control, as seen with Gacy. The need for sexual gratification, as seen with Bundy. The thrill of the hunt and the kill, as seen with the Zodiac. And sometimes, killers are driven by financial need or a sense of ideology, like those who kill in the name of a twisted belief or cause. But there's another layer, an even darker one, that we must consider. Childhood trauma, abuse, neglect. These killers don't just wake up one day and decide to kill. No, it's often the result of years of psychological damage. Studies have shown that most serial killers experienced abuse, whether it was physical, sexual, or emotional, during their formative years. A 2019 study found that 60% of serial killers had faced such trauma. And this abuse is often what shatters their ability to empathize with others. For killers like Dennis Rader, the BTK killer, childhood abuse combined with a need for control pushed him into a life of terror. For Jeffrey Dahmer, it was the social isolation and neglect he experienced in his youth that led to the horrific acts he committed as an adult. The mind of a serial killer is warped by these experiences. It is a lens through which they view the world differently than the rest of us. And this is the part that's hard to grasp. Serial killers aren't born monsters, they are made. And as we dive deeper into their psyches, we begin to see how these dark desires take root, grow, and eventually consume their every action. But understanding the mind of a serial killer isn't just about looking at their childhood or their motivations. It's about looking at the way they think, the patterns in their minds that allow them to justify their actions. They aren't driven purely by impulse. No, these killers often use distorted reasoning to justify their crimes, to minimize the guilt that should be eating away at them. For Bundy, his killings were experiments, a way to test his fantasies. Dahmer saw his victims as possessions to keep them forever, to make them his in death in ways he couldn't in life. These cognitive distortions are what allow them to do the unthinkable without feeling remorse. To them, the victims are nothing more than objects, things to be used, to be disposed of. The more we understand these killers' minds, the more we can recognize the signs early, the more we can prevent future tragedies. By analyzing the behaviors, the thought patterns, and the environmental factors, we can begin to piece together the psychology of evil. The psychology of a serial killer goes far beyond their childhood trauma or twisted desires. When we try to understand what drives these individuals to murder, we must dig deeper into their psyche, the warped lens through which they view the world. These killers don't just see themselves as monsters, they justify their actions, creating a reality where their victims are nothing more than pawns in their twisted game. Take Ted Bundy, a man who killed with charm, who appeared normal to the outside world. But in his mind, his victims were not real people. They were objects. In interviews, Bundy spoke of his murders like a scientist discussing experiments, completely detached from the horror he had inflicted. He rationalized that he had to kill to satisfy urges he could not control. For him, each victim was part of a sick fantasy, one that he believed he needed to fulfill to feel whole. It's not just a lack of empathy, it's a distortion of reality. This is a crucial factor in understanding serial killers. Their cognitive distortions are what allow them to view their victims as disposable, to strip away their humanity and turn them into nothing more than stepping stones to their own desires. Jeffrey Dahmer's twisted mindset took this to an even darker place. For Dahmer, the victims were not only objects, they were possessions. He did not just kill to satisfy a sadistic need for violence. He killed to possess his victims, to keep them with him forever. Dahmer's infamous confessions revealed how he viewed his victims as a means to create a perfect life for himself, one where he could control every aspect of their existence, even in death. It wasn't just about the physical act of murder. It was about the control, the need to dominate, the need to create something that belonged solely to him. The chilling idea of controlling someone's life and death speaks volumes about the deep psychological damage Dahmer had suffered. It was a lifetime of emotional neglect and isolation that warped his sense of reality, pushing him to commit unspeakable acts. And what about the Zodiac Killer? A man who made the game of murder his life's work. To him, it wasn't just about the act of killing. It was about the game, the intellectual challenge of evading capture, of making the authorities look foolish as he taunted them with cryptic letters and ciphers. The Zodiac's thirst for recognition and control was unlike any other. He wasn't killing out of anger, revenge, or necessity. He was killing for the sheer thrill of it, to feel superior, to feel invincible. The rush of outsmarting the authorities gave him the power he so desperately craved. These killers manipulate the world around them. They play mind games, using charm, deceit, and manipulation to control their victims and avoid suspicion. And they do it all with such ease that it is almost impossible to see the monster lurking behind the mask. As we continue to explore their twisted minds, we must ask, what is it that drives these people to go this far? Is it all about the thrill, the need to dominate? Or is there something deeper, something inherent in their psychology that makes them incapable of feeling remorse or empathy? The brain of a serial killer operates differently from the average person's. Neuroimaging studies have shown that killers with antisocial personality disorder, ASPD, often exhibit reduced activity in the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain that controls impulse regulation and decision-making. Without this control, killers can act on their darkest urges without hesitation, without remorse. And in the case of someone like Dahmer or Bundy, this lack of impulse control is coupled with a complete lack of empathy. Their ability to disconnect from the horror of their actions makes them all the more dangerous. But even with these biological factors in play, we can't ignore the environmental influences that shape these killers. Childhood trauma, abuse, neglect. These are the factors that push someone to the brink, shaping their worldview in a way that makes violence feel justified. It is not an excuse. It is an explanation. It's an insight into the broken minds of those who walk among us, hiding in plain sight until they strike. When we look at serial killers, we often focus on the horrific acts they commit, but the real tragedy lies in the journey that led them there. It's in their childhoods, their experiences, their relationships. It's in the pain they endured, the neglect they suffered, and the way they internalized it all. These killers are the product of a broken system, one that fails to see the signs until it's too late. The impact of serial killers is not just felt by their victims, it is felt by society as a whole. These killers shatter the fabric of our communities, creating fear and paranoia that lingers long after their crimes have been committed. Bundy's spree in the 1970s caused mass panic across several states, particularly among women. Curfews were enforced, and women were warned to stay inside after dark, fearful of a man who could strike at any time. The fear of being targeted, of being the next victim, gripped the public. People didn't know who to trust or where to go. The killer was out there somewhere, blending into society, his charm disarming anyone who might have stopped him. In Milwaukee, Jeffrey Dahmer's arrest in 1991 sparked outrage and riots. The community felt betrayed by the authorities who had failed to act on numerous warnings. Dahmer's crimes exposed a deep flaw in law enforcement, how a serial killer could hide in plain sight for years, committing his horrific acts right under their noses. The city's trust in the police was shattered, and the ripple effects of Dahmer's crimes were felt throughout the nation. The media plays a significant role in shaping public perception of serial killers. Sensationalized headlines, dramatized portrayals, and sensationalized documentaries turn these killers into cultural icons. They are glorified, almost mythologized in ways that risk overshadowing the true victims, the people who were lost in the wake of their actions. Shows like Mindhunter and Dahmer monster humanize these killers, exploring their childhoods, their motives, and the horrors they inflicted. But in doing so, they risk shifting the focus from the real victims to the killers themselves. It's a dangerous trend that reinforces the public's obsession with these figures, turning them into figures of intrigue, while the victims fade into the background. But we can't forget the victims. We can't allow the killers to take the spotlight, even in their deaths. We must remember the real human cost of these crimes. The families left behind, the communities torn apart, the lives that were stolen. Law enforcement plays a critical role in understanding and stopping serial killers. The FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit, BAU, has been instrumental in profiling killers, using psychological insights to predict their next move and track them down. But even with advanced profiling techniques, there are still challenges. Underfunded police departments, lack of jurisdictional cooperation, and delays in gathering crucial evidence make it harder for law enforcement to catch these killers before they strike again. And yet, even with these challenges, there are successes. The use of DNA evidence in the capture of Gary Ridgway, the Green River Killer, is a testament to the power of law enforcement and technological advancements in solving these cases. In 2001, Ridgway was arrested after years of evading capture, thanks to DNA evidence collected from his victims. This breakthrough in forensic science marked a turning point in the fight against serial killers. And it shows that with the right resources and determination, these monsters can be brought to justice.